What is going on, everybody? My name is Dakota, and welcome back to Cologne. And today we got a special one for you. Today we're going to be looking at Nishane TERO or Nishane. I have no idea how to say this, so I'm just going to call this one TERO for today. I've tried Googling it, I've watched other videos, and I've heard Nishane and Nishane. So I have no idea how to say that. But now that I got that out of the way, let's get into it. Alrighty, so I actually won this in a raffle. And one of the things I like to do is on those little raffles, I like to just get oddball stuff that I normally wouldn't buy myself. And that's actually leaned into me getting several fragrances that I genuinely enjoy. I really like this one. I won this one in a raffle. That's how I discovered the Sphinx brand as a whole, and they've got 3 or 4 that are really, really good. So anytime y'all want to try to branch out on something, but you don't really want to wrap a whole lot of money into it, try doing a little raffle or something. It actually works out pretty well. How we're going to get started is we're going to show off the atomizer on this, and the atomizer is actually pretty rock solid. It doesn't have a big long projected burst, but it has a very widespread pressurized burst, which I can appreciate that just because kind of makes it a little easier for the application. And one thing you get when this first gets into the air, because this is a beautiful scent. I was actually really surprised I like this as much as I did. One thing you get when it does get in the air, you're kind of hit with a little spicy pepper right off the top, and then but it fades incredibly quick into like a salted caramel. And I think that's what I like about it the most is I've never really had a fragrance that was kind of salty in nature until I got this one, and this one's got a lot of it, so that's always fun. So now what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 shots there on the wrist. And that is one of the things that I really like about this fragrance is it is very different from almost everything I have in my collection. As we go over the notes, you're gonna see this has black pepper, Szechuan pepper, salt, and cinnamon. And for some reason, those 4 things work phenomenally well with each other. It's a weird mix that I didn't think would work very well, but for some reason they pulled it off amazingly on this. But with that being said, we're gonna get into the notes, and I'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, as we get in the notes of these, the top note is going to be caramel, black pepper, Szechuan pepper, and salt. And some of that pepper does fade off very quickly after the first few minutes, but some of that caramel and salt tends to linger. And I would say it's a staple all the way down to the dry down of that salt and caramel. In the middle notes of this, you get patchouli and cinnamon. I don't get much patchouli out of this, but I do get some of that cinnamon all the way into the dry down, but it does fade away after a little bit. And the base notes of this, you're going to get amber, oak, and vetiver. Now, this is kind of a louder fragrance. You get a lot of that vetiver when it does dry all the way down, mixed in with some of that saltiness. In the deepest parts of the dry down, you get a little bit of that oak, but it's more of like a background note than kind of forward facing. And you do get some of the warmth from the amber. So I do think this is a good enough blend that it should be a fragrance that'll last all day. But that's going to get us wrapped up. Let me get y'all flip back around and we'll get back into the rest. Alrighty, so I gave this one close to an hour to dry down because as I've worn this a few times, I have discovered that this has an insanely long dry down time. When you first spray this, you're hit with a big dose of pepper, but after about the first minute or two, it does fall off, and then you're left with like a salty caramel for the opening. And some of that saltiness never really goes away all the way through into the deepest parts of the dry down. There's a little bit of earthiness as it's drying down all the way through the back down that just gets a little bit louder as it goes. And then when this does dry all the way down, you end up with a finished product that's like a warm, earthy with a little salty mix into it. And it doesn't sound like it would be that good. Like it doesn't sound like that would be a very appealing fragrance. There's just something in this fragrance that makes you want to come back and keep wearing this. I've worn it about 4 or 5 times over the past several weeks, just trying to like build the scent profile for it and kind of test the dry downs. And I've sprayed it a little heavy, sprayed it a little light, stuff like that. And that's normally what I do when I go to review a fragrance is I'll wear it a handful of times, unless it's like an unboxing, then obviously then obviously I can't. But I like to wear it a few times just to kind of get like a good vibe for it and kind of build out like how my nose picks it up and stuff like that. And on this one, I keep wanting to wear this one around the house because I love that kind of salty nature that this leads. And I know my wife really likes this one as well. She doesn't get as much of the saltiness as I do. Listening to her talk about it, she actually gets a lot of the caramel out of it. So whenever she talks about it, because she kind of helps me do some of this and pick up, because the second opinion is always amazing. But one of the things that she's talked about is when it dries down, she thinks it's more of like a sweet, like caramel type of vetiver. The one thing that we both agree on is there's definitely vetiver, so you get a little bit of that earthiness in the base. but she gets more of like a sweet caramel, and I get more of like a salty vibe from it. One thing I love about fragrances is the skin play, I guess you could say, of how it smells so different on different skins. And to me, that's how this one is because I had a friend of mine who tried this one out, and he came out somewhere in the middle of both of us. Listening to him talk and whenever we were discussing it and stuff like that, he gets a little bit of all three. He gets caramel, salty, and vetiver. So it's always fun just kind of comparing and contrasting how different people wear different fragrances and stuff. All right, now to get into the price, performance, and availability of this. Availability wise, I don't know that any box stores is actually going to have this. I got mine out of a raffle. Googling for it and searching around for it. Pretty much it's mostly discounters and online retailers that are going to have it. Full retail on this is somewhere in that 275 to 300. Discounters is definitely the way to go because you can get this for about the 150 to 170 range on discounters. But the fragrance groups is actually where you will find these best because you can pick this up for about the $130-ish range in the fragrance groups. But as I've always said in the fragrance groups, always be cautious with those, vet the buyers, stuff like that. Don't just assume someone for their word because you can get burned really easy doing that. So if you do go that route, proceed with caution. But yeah, so now to get into the performance side of this. Performance wise is very, very good. The longevity I get out of this is actually like in that 8 to 9 hour range. But that also surprised me as well because I don't see like a salty caramel type fragrance. I wouldn't picture that getting that kind of performance out of it because I have other fragrances that have similar kind of note breakdowns and they nowhere near that. The sillage on this is very good. It's in that 2 foot plus range. The projection is very good on this as well. That projection is around that 2 foot range. And this is a very thick, heavy fragrance whenever you first put it on, and as it dries down, the notes on this you would think that it would lead itself to be a little lighter, a little airier fragrance. It's not. This is actually a very heavy fragrance, which would lead this to be a perfect fall and winter fragrance. Or if it's like a cool spring day, you could probably get away with wearing this. But given the time of year now, this one may get slowly pushed to the back. But I just had to review it because I won it recently and I've been wearing a lot and I'm liking it a lot. So yeah, I couldn't help myself. Had to go ahead and wear this one, and everybody's just gonna suffer in the heat with me. One of the biggest things that I actually took away from this fragrance is like 10 or 11 hours after I'd put it on, and that's without a refresh, and I put it directly on my skin. You can still pick up, now it's a skin scent at that point. It's not really got a whole lot of performance left, but you can still very much smell some of that salty vetiver in there. You could pick up some of the oak in there in the deep dry down because this doesn't put off, to me, it doesn't have like a big oak note into it. Oak is the wood note that they went with this one. And it smells clean, but it doesn't smell, it's just not a loud smell. Like it's in there, you can kind of tell it floating around in the background. It's a nice undertone, but it's just not something that you're really going to be able to pick up until deep into the dry down. All right, so if I had to give this an overall rating, this one's actually going to be really difficult for me to rate because as profile goes, I would give it a 9 for the profile, but for the overall performance, I would probably get it closer to an 8 or an 8.5. And the only real things I'm going to knock it for is for the profile of it, it is a little bit steep. And as much as I like the fragrance, there's been 1 or 2 times where I've worn it where it's actually gotten a little bit too much for me. And it's because it is such a heavy fragrance. I've been wearing it in the evenings when it's a little cool, just kind of trying to like test it in its environment kind of thing. It will kind of play with your senses a little bit. It's not the most natural smelling. It does smell good. It does smell like quality, but it is just a little bit synthetic. And some of that syntheticness may lead it to maybe give you a little bit of a headache. So you've got to kind of proceed with caution on this one. I would not go so far as to say this is a safe or a blind buy because I could see a lot of people really not liking this because some of that caramel and the salt could lead it to have like a rubbery smell. That is one thing that I've got a few compliments wearing this, but it was something that someone else, I was wearing it at work, and somebody had kind of made the mention that it kind of smelled like a rubbery, almost like a burnt rubber kind of smell. I don't pick that up on it, but I could kind of see where they're coming from with it because some of that caramel salty, some of the other fragrances I have that use similar note breakdowns, I kind of pick up some of that on those. So it is kind of weird how some of the caramel fragrances I feel like kind of get that, can kind of form that profile. I don't get it myself, but yeah, if I had to rate this, I'd probably give it somewhere in that 8.5, which is still solid. I still enjoy having this. I'm going to wear this until it runs out, and then I probably won't buy a bottle, but I'll probably keep a decan of it just for a little around the houseware. But I do think that is going to get us wrapped up on the day. Go ahead and get this bottle one more time. This is another bottle that's kind of fighting with the ring light a little bit. Sorry, guys. But yeah, that is going to get us wrapped up. As always, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for subscribing, for sticking around, for staying tuned, watching the videos, supporting the channel. I truly appreciate all the feedback that I get, and I appreciate everybody who watches these channels and tunes in for this. And as I like to say in every video, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.